There's a lot of ways to make money investing in property, and one of those cases, buying land. It may not actually have a property on it, but there are so many things that you can do with it. So in today's episode, I'm going to share with you what to look for when buying land. My name is Andrew Finney, your real estate geek. If you need help finding a top agent where you live, or if you simply want to drop me a line to say hello, my contact info is below. If you're new here, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel now and like this video. Tap the bell icon to get notified of the next one. Thank you. So in this video, you're going to learn a lot of information about buying land. We're going to cover 12 categories of land. We're also going to cover 7 strategies that you can use to invest in land and 5 risks to consider when purchasing land. Okay, so let's go ahead and get right into it with what you can develop on land. The first thing that comes to mind is single family homes. Second thing is multifamily homes. Third thing is office space. Fourth thing is retail space. Fifth is mixed retail and residential space. The sixth is a hotel. The seventh is a resort. The eighth is a strip mall. The ninth is a hospital. The 10th is a mall, the 11th is a farm, and the 12th is a parking lot. I'm sure you have seen this across the city and anywhere that you live in, land being developed at any given time to meet the needs of the city and the people that are there. So these are great opportunities, depending on where you're buying your land, that you would have the opportunity to either develop or to actually sit and hold and speculate that land. So let's go ahead and go into what is the goal of purchasing land. So before you actually buy a piece of land, you have to decide what your goal is for the investment. There's several different strategies that you should consider and think about what your intention is for the investment in land and what you're going to do with that land as you own it. Maybe you do nothing, maybe you just simply speculate it. So let's get into 7 strategies that you can consider when you get ready to purchase land. The first strategy is buy and sell. That's a lot like flipping real estate. When you think about a house, you're going to buy it, you're going to fix it, you're going to flip it, you're going to sell it, right? Kind of the same thing with land in this case, because you're basically flipping the land. You believe that you've purchased the land below market value and you're hoping that you can find another buyer that's willing to pay a higher price for it than you bought it, or at least the market value has increased on that land at a future point in time when you get ready to sell it. The second strategy is buy and hold. Now with a buy and hold, that's a lot like an investor that buys a multifamily home, a single family home, or an apartment, and they're hanging on to it for the long term and renting it out. Well, with land, when we're talking about this approach, you can buy the land and hold on to it for a period of time that's comfortable to you, and you believe that the land will appreciate in value. So where you see this a lot at is in growing cities. Like Las Vegas, Nevada is a massively growing city. There's over 2 million people here, and it's only getting bigger with the professional sports teams that are coming into town, with the Raiders and the Golden Knights, and people just trying to look for more affordable housing. So investors that had purchased land maybe 20 or 30 years ago on the outskirts of the city are seeing great opportunity right now to sell that land to builders. So this is an approach when you talk about buy and hold for a certain period of time. Depends on how your city and area is growing and where you believe that land's value will be in the future. So you could sell that land to a developer or somebody that's looking to develop that property in the future. For reference, this is a common approach in areas that are being re-gentrified. The investor purchases the land in the hopes that they can sell it to a developer in the future as the area becomes increasingly more popular and increasingly more in demand. The third strategy is buy, develop, and hold. So with a buy, develop, and hold, now what you're doing is you're looking at purchasing raw land with the intention of developing the land yourself. Now this could be for any number of the 12 categories that we covered. Let's say that in this case that you want to build a complex of townhouses which you will rent out to residential tenants. You could also decide to build a strip mall. Maybe you want to build the strip mall out, rent out the space, or maybe you want to sell it off altogether. It's up to you what you would want to do. But being that we're talking about buy, develop, and hold, this is so that you can have it as an income producing property. Another option that you might choose is that you could develop the land into a bed and breakfast, which you will run and manage yourself or hire people to do it. In the fourth strategy, you have buy, cultivate, and hold. In this approach, you're going to be looking at using the actual land more than building property on land. For example, you may want to grow crops on the land or rent it to a farmer or rent it to a rancher, and you can set up a Christmas tree farm, you can set up a vineyard, you can set up anything that you want, but you're actually using the land, hence the cultivate part of this strategy. In short, you're actively managing the land to hope to make a profit from what the land can actually produce itself. The fifth strategy is buy, go through the entitlement process, and sell. So in this scenario, what you're doing is you're purchasing the land and then you'll go through the process of having the property zoned for a specific use. For example, let's say that you bought a piece of land or plot of land that was zoned for commercial or industrial use, but now that the area is developing, going back to what we were saying a moment ago, when areas expand and grow, you have the city that may have originally intended that land for industrial, commercial, or office or retail space, but now maybe it's more productive and the highest and best use of that land is to build residential homes on it, apartments or townhouses. So now you're going through the entitlement process to rezone the land from commercial, industrial to maybe residential, whether it's high density, low density, medium density residential. Yes, there are so many different categories of zoning itself. It would make the land more valuable to potential developers, and the more desirable it is, the more likely they are to buy it. And by having it rezoned, it's one less step that the developers would have to do themselves. Now, in the sixth strategy, what we look at is buy, develop, and sell. In this case, you're going to buy the land with the intention of developing the land yourself and then selling it to an end user in mind. For example, you buy the land, you build a new construction home, and then sell it to a buyer who wants to live in the property. As another example, you could set up the vineyard and sell it to a vintner who wants to buy the land and manage the vineyard for a business that they have in mind. And to be honest, I get a lot of people in Las Vegas that reach out to me with the idea of purchasing land just for the first example of this point, where they say, Andrew, you know, what is available right now that's out there that I could buy and I could start getting into new construction homes as a small builder or a medium-sized builder and getting up and running as a builder. They want to get in on building homes. They want to get in on learning how to develop land and sell homes with that land. So this is the sixth strategy that we're talking about here when you talk about buy, develop, and sell. The seventh strategy is buy, develop, and rent. So finally, you could develop the land and then rent it out to someone else. For example, you might want to buy the land and then you decide to put a parking lot on it because there's not ample parking in the area. Now think of any downtown area in a medium to large size city. What do you see? You see a lot of different types of parking structures, right? You actually have the parking structures that are kind of like the high-rise big boys of parking lots, and then you also have the ones that might just be one single pad or two pads or two levels of a parking structure. This is an example of buying, developing, and renting that land out for a specific use, in this case where the opportunity existed. Now what's kind of interesting here is if you look at some of those large cities and you start looking at some of that land that's vacant around that area, that land could have been in one specific family for a very, very long time, and maybe it was best used as a residential property at that time. So in this case, you might be going through the entitlement process to have it rezoned so that you could build a parking lot, because as the city is developed, everything is popped up around it, and now there's no parking except for that little really annoying on the street parking, right? So the people that have the vision to put a parking lot in there, and as the city is growing around them, stand that opportunity to make a good amount of money on that. Okay, so now that we've covered the seventh strategy and all the wonderful things you could do with the land, let's go ahead and balance it out to help you make a well-informed decision about what you want to do by identifying the risks to consider when buying land. In specific, there are 5 that you should be aware of. The first one is the zoning classification. It's important to note that with zoning classification that every town has what's called a land use plan. This basically divides the town into different areas including commercial, residential, agricultural, industrial, historical, and even mixed use. So you need to be aware of what the use of the land is for the property that you intend to purchase and what the current zoning of that property is. The first issue that you're going to have is assessing what do you want to do with the land. Again, going back to your intent and what is your goal for the property. Let's say that you bought a land and it was zoned residential, and your intention is to build upon that land and sell residences off that property. Not a problem at all. But now what happens if you bought residential property and you want to turn it to commercial? Well, you're going to have to go through a reclassification and zoning of that property. So some of the zoning classifications can actually be decades old within the city's land use plan. So those city planners might be open to a reclassification. The only way to know for sure is that you're going to have to petition the town in order to get the land reclassified. Many towns will want you to show that there has been a substantial change to the area in the neighborhood which will warrant the change in zoning. Maybe the city has grown in such a way that there's a lot of residential communities around there. You want to rezone what is a residential piece of land to put a shopping center in because that's what the area is missing. In that case, the city may agree to your petition and allow the rezoning of the property so that you can build on the land which your intended purpose is. The city will also want to make sure that your intentions for the land will not have any negative effects as causing nearby areas to flood or increasing traffic in such a way that it cannot handle. Now, a caveat here just for you to be aware of is even if you get the town council to agree and you get them on board, you might have a separate fight on your hands with the neighbors who will petition to prevent you from being able to build. So it's important to know what you're looking at and make sure that that area is going to appreciate what your intentions are for that piece of land. The second risk is zoning restrictions. So the second factor when you're purchasing land is the size of development that you will be allowed to build and any kind of what's called mandatory setback requirements. There's usually a code in every city that will require your property to be built a certain distance from neighboring property lines. This can include the front of the property from the distance to the street. You can have also the two sides and the back. You can have permanent structures such as a home, garage, or deck that must be built a certain distance away from the property lines. Take for instance the Las Vegas area. area. There's different parts of the city, whether it's North Las Vegas, Henderson, Summerlin, Lake Las Vegas, what have you, that have different setback requirements. These can range from 5-foot setbacks at a minimum to a minimum of 10-foot setbacks for the distance in between two properties and how close they can be together. Some of them at the distance to the street might be 15 feet, could be 25 feet. So everything changes with time because the board is always going to be taking a look and making sure that they're doing what they believe is the correct thing for the appropriate setbacks of property that you're looking to build at that time within that city's jurisdiction. So depending on the size and layout that you're looking at, it could greatly affect how many homes you can build or how many structures you can build on that land, and it might not be worth the investment. So you need to make sure that you know what those codes are and you can appropriately use a plot map and plan out what the cost is going to be to build out your structures on that property with the codes in mind for appropriate setbacks. The next thing is what's called lot coverage. Now that code is in place to prevent flooding issues. Nobody likes a flood, so there must be a certain percentage of the lot that is not covered that will allow the rain to seep into the land and into the soil so it does not flood neighboring properties. The next aspect of zoning restrictions is called a floor area ratio. This is the square footage of each floor of the property. Take for instance that certain towns may include basements, others do not, and what constitutes a finished floor plan and what does not constitute a finished floor plan. Like here in Las Vegas, you can have a basement. There's not many of them, being honest with you, but if you do have a basement and it's not a finished basement, it cannot be counted into the square footage of the home. In some areas this may be allowed. In some areas like here in Las Vegas, it wouldn't be allowed unless that basement is finished. And then what happens is that the city will then take a look at that and it'll be added to the overall square footage and then divided by the size of the lot. The total floor area can only be a certain percentage of the lot size, which each town actually determines. So this is the importance of getting in good with your town council to make sure that if you're looking at purchasing land here, that you understand the dynamics involved with that land within that region and within that city. The next thing to consider underneath the zoning restrictions is the height. You need to know the height of the structure that you can build. If you were planning a 3-family building, but the town will not allow more than 2 stories at that location, the investment may or may not make monetary sense to you at the end of the day. So it's really important to know what your height requirements are prior to building. And then you'd also have this thing called accessory buildings. Accessory buildings are code restrictions on the size and placement of structures like garages and sheds on the property. There might be a requirement to show how many parking spaces that you must have for this specific property in mind. And some towns might actually require those areas to be covered. So then that brings us into the third risk, and that's the environmental issues of the land. So when you're looking at buying land, you don't necessarily know what lies beneath the soil. You could have high levels of radon or asbestos. The soil could be unstable or unfit to build on. Certain areas have what's called expansive soil that doesn't make it all that nice to build properties on because the soil wants to expand when you're trying to put a foundation on. So it's very important to know that, because if it causes the foundation to crack, we have a problem, right? And then what happens if the property is located in a flood zone? It's not necessarily in the world if you're able to build up the grading or change the grading of the soil and raise it above the flood line that will assist in preventing flooding. But flood insurance is very expensive and it could be a detriment to potential buyers. That being said, there are some exceptions. Let's take Hoboken, New Jersey as an example. It's located in a flood zone, the whole city, but because of its proximity to the New York City, the land in that area is considered very valuable. So people want to buy it even though they know it's in a flood zone. The fourth risk is what's the distance to the utilities? How easy is it going to be to get utilities into that location? That would include sewer, running water, electricity, gas, telephone, cable, internet. My goodness, there's a lot of stuff that needs to go on there. So do neighboring properties have those services, or is your plot of land in the middle of nowhere and you're going to have to pull them in? If your property's in the middle of nowhere and it does not have access to a sewer line, you can have a percolation test done, and a percolation test would be done for a septic system. So it could be installed on the property, and essentially what a percolation test will do is it will test how quickly water drains through the soil. Assuming the land passes the percolation test, you will have to dig a well for drinking water, which will cost 5 figures in many cases, pretty easy. So you need to take a closer look at how far the utilities are and understand what the costs associated are with bringing those utilities to your plot of land. So a good way of getting that information is contacting your public utility companies, contacting your trusted real estate advisor to see what the estimated distance to the closest utilities are, and asking the public utility company about how much money that would cost to install those services on that plot, or contact an engineer in your area that's familiar with bringing utilities onto plots of land and ask them what the charge would be to install that, and factor that into your overall cost depending on what your goal and your investment of that land really is. is at the end of the day. Now, the fifth risk is if you're not producing an income, you're still going to have expenses on this land. The main expense that you're going to have come in the form of property taxes. So even if you're just speculating the land, when we're talking about buy and just holding the land, or buy and speculating into the future with this land, look, you're still going to have property taxes, and you need to account for them to make sure that you're ready for the expense of the land, even when it's not generating an income. Okay, so I hope you learned a lot from today's video. Here's what I want you to do is tell me what you're thinking about this episode in the comment section below, along with any of your tips you'd like to share with us when buying land. Now I'm going to go ahead and pop up my contact information. If you want to drop me a line to say hello, or if you simply need help finding a top agent where you live, please let me know. Always love to hear from you, always here to help you. And if you haven't already, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. Number 1, please subscribe to this channel. Number 2, please like this video. And number 3, please share this video around with someone you know it's going to be able to help, because I'm sure you could think of just one other person right now, perhaps just like you, that's wondering, what should I know before I get into buying land? Share this video with them to help them start gauging their thought process and learning what they need to consider when buying land, with the pros and the cons. Thank you. In between now and next time, I'm wishing you and yours a lifetime full of love, wealth, abundance, and happiness. Thank you for watching today, team, and enjoy an amazing day.